keynote speaker, I'd like to introduce a very important person, Albany County Legislature Chair, Mr. Sean Ward. Thank you for coming. Now in community in the capital district, our beloved Congressman Paul Tanko.
There's the best introduction I've received. It is so good to be with all of you here this afternoon, this morning. I think is it noon yet or not?
11 a.m.
It's been a long morning. I started at Albany Airport at 6:15. So to send off our veterans to go to Washington, which they do routinely. And so we had 43 individuals from the veterans community, from World War II, from the Korean conflict, to Vietnam and the Gulf War, who went down for the day. And so that's how the day started. But it is great to be with all of you. Certainly to your local chapter president, HB, Dr. Wang, who's a longtime friend, and my friends from Tricia who are here, and Ram, and all of the folks who are part of the leadership. Thank you for your investment in our local community in the greater capital region. But it is fun to come back about a year after the efforts to start up APAPA as a local chapter. The Asian and Pacific Islander American Public Affairs Association held its initial efforts last year, and my colleague, Grace Mayer, came up from New York City. She's part of our New York delegation in the House of Representatives. And it was an honor to join with Grace to do a number of the official programmings that were part of that day. And obviously, the support is there. It's wonderful to see all of the efforts being made. And let me do a shout out to Sean again. Sean Ward, thank you as the chair of the legislature for being here, and Supervisor Phil Barrett for being here too, who I know is active, both of the gentlemen, with a number of the Asian organizations, Asian American, Pacific Islander, American associations in the region. The whole effort to speak to APAPA and the strength that it brings, the foundation, its underpinning, is a very welcoming thought. Because what I see happening with APAPA is the strengthening of the voice in a collective manner of the Asian and Pacific Islander population. What we do, I think, through APAPA is make people aware of the force, the growing force that that demographic of our population is. You continue to add to the mosaic of the capital region, which is a great bit of diversity already. But that power of a diversity, that magnificence of diversity is underscored by the efforts that APAPA makes, making certain people know what the demographics look like, what the exponential rise in the numbers is looking like, and where there is a need for incorporation in all sorts of ways, including government, to have that force felt. Now, I distinctly remember last year, as people talked about the APAPA influence, one of the prime focuses that they brought was that of voter registration, which I think is indeed critical across the board, no matter what the demographic may be. There's been an alerting of the census, if you will, to the fact that registering is very important in the experiment of the democracy that we have in our republic. That making certain that the representative democracy works best when all people are involved. And so as you continue to grow as part of the population, it's important to do that very bit of outreach to make certain that the voter registration drive is underway and that you are contacted in various ways by the forces of APAPA. The strengthening, of course, is important. As was said by the panelists here, elections can be very close. And that 1, 2, 5, 10 votes can determine who is going to be the voice in local, in county, in state, and federal policy areas. And so that's important. I think the networking that comes with that fulfillment of not only registering to vote, but being an active participant in the halls of government, in the development of priorities, because a budget is exactly that, is it not? It tells us what the priorities of the people may happen to be. And so I think that that is indeed very critical to the establishment of a well-functioning government, be it from the most local of levels to that in Washington. Now, there's also very strong evidence that there is an influence that many can make. And I think that influence becomes more pronounced when you are actively involved as a registered voter. It just seems to go that way. Obviously, if you don't register, you can talk and speak at these meetings. But again, that action that you take, I think, is more pronounced because you're going to be going, most likely, to that voting booth and sharing your sentiments. And so that is very important. Now, I look at the issues that are being discussed as we speak in Washington, and many of those require all of us to have input in order to have the most effective outcome. Now, you look at something like the DACA effort, the Dreamers Bill. It is so important for people to tell stories, share anecdotal evidence, because that becomes the ingredient of successful policy. If we do it blindly, if we do it without that human element being added in the dialogue, we're a weaker outcome. And so with the Dreamers Act, I think it's very important for people to share exactly who this is. It may be neighbors and friends that we work with all the time. The one thing that's very interesting about the Dreamers situation is the veiled secrecy. Oftentimes people maintain a quiet attitude about the fact that they're a dreamer because of fear, because of intimidation that might happen. Now, on average, our dreamers are 6 years of age when they arrived here. And on average today, they're 26 years of age. Many of them owning their own businesses. Many serving, nearly 1,000 serving in our military. Many involved in college activity. And of all the dreamers, 97% are either in college or are working. 91% are working. So those numbers need to be shared. But they also require storytelling, anecdotal evidence. And because the dreamer population, again, is very diverse, it's important, like a group like a pop-up, to step up and share with the many people who are adding to our population, to our neighborhood. They need to be voices on behalf of the dreamers to put that into appropriate perspective. Why? Because there's myths that people want to share about dreamers. They would suggest that they drain our economy. With the Papa's involvement, we can show very clearly. I've stood with Grace Meng, I've stood with Judy Chu, who was part of your national board, part of your directors. We've been at press conferences together as dreamers will line the front rows in the press conference, weeping, shedding tears because they know there's great intrepidation. There's a desire by many to impact unfavorably upon the dreamer community without the facts in place. And so to feel the partnership with dreamers, to know that something significantly good can happen with their input. And we use their stories. I've been with Judy, with Grace Meng, the congresswomen, to share their stories on the House floor, at press conferences, talking about who they are, dispelling the myths, those myths including the fact that they are draining our economy, that they don't pay taxes. The truth be told, they pay their taxes, they pay into Medicare, they pay into Social Security. And the other myth about the drain on the negative side, they do not qualify for federal dollars for school tuition assistance. They do not qualify for food stamps. They do not qualify for Medicaid. So, get a life. A Papa can bring the truth to the table. And those who want to denounce the dreamers then look foolish in their attempt. And these are honest to goodness, heartfelt, homespun stories that speak to the fact that they are living the American dream and that we ought not, with public policy, suffocate that dream. That's how a Papa can be a powerful force. That's how civil engagement civic involvement rather, can impact favorably on the situation. You know, living in a democracy, as we all do, is not an easy thing because it requires much of us if we do it correctly. And so APAPA organizes collectively and inspires individual responses to the healthcare situations that we need to know. What I find in some of our growing populations of diversity of late, be they African or Caribbean, and certainly here Asian or Pacific Islander in nature, is that many are offering innovation. They're bringing with them tremendous intellect that is then incorporated in some sort of American dream that designs and builds a small business. So if we're doing small business discussion, if we're doing small business innovation policy in Washington, yes, APAPA should be at the table as an organization and with its membership to speak forcefully to the demographics, the concerns that you're living, that we need to know about. As we grow more diverse, it is a reach to the newest of populations to advise us and advise us well. I think also, when we're dealing with situations like healthcare, there's no denying that with healthcare there needs to be a wellness preventative piece, there needs to be that acute care, there needs to be affordability, accessibility, quality of care, of course. But we're kidding ourselves if we don't acknowledge there are some cultural aspects to how healthcare is delivered, how it's received, how it's shared in messaging. And it's important for us, again, to reach the populations to know what works best. And who can tell us best about the growing Asian and Pacific Islander communities that are now dispersed amongst the greater culture of America in a very significant way. They need to inform us in, again, the most essential of ways. So it's the public policy development that is so critical. It can determine whether you qualify for programs or not. It can determine whether those programs are being effective or not. And, you know, and so I work with our colleagues from the Asian sector, the Pacific Islander sector, that will tell us of what needs to be done. We look at the forcefulness of some of the cultures, the diversity in our culture, that may address the territories that have been impacted by Harvey or Irma or Maria or Jose. And again, the outreach that is done, the networking that is routine, then becomes a powerful bit of union at a time that is very critical, where input is required. So the input that is developed through APAPA in significant ways, in particularly focused ways, creates a partnership in government that then enters into all of the dialogue, all of the discussion, which then creates that routineness that is important. You know, as a grandson of immigrants, I still think it's important for that immigrant heart to beat in my chest, to understand that they pursued a better life, that they dreamed of life that would be grander for their children and grandchildren. And I think in the case of my grandparents, it was beyond what their expectations could even imagine. But my tribute to them, my honoring of their legacy, is to continue to approach the various issues with that immigrant heart, foreseeing what the outcome should look like. I think that powerful strength, my crew hears it all the time, my friends hear it all the time, we have to remember our roots. And what APAPA does is present to us in the most available way, because you are, in many ways, that newest of population growth in our country. And I have always stated and believed that the greatest sense of Americana, the passion for America, is best expressed through immigrants. There's no other force that can express it better. Working your fingers to the bone, having several jobs, getting invested in every way because you're with these newfound opportunities. And it reminds us of what life was like from our humble beginnings. And when we lose that, we lose something near and dear to this country and all for which she stands. And so it's why I cherish working with the Papa, because that passion is so real, it's so recent, it's so alive. And it's so much what we need in America. There are forces that want to tear us down. There are forces that want to rip away health care from 32 million people. There are forces that want to deny a pre-existing condition protection. There are forces that want to take the extended health care benefits package and reduce it significantly. But when we alert our senses to the fact that many who come here and work here and invest here and call this home their new home, and who want to be able to dream their American dream, should not be held back with programs that will strengthen them and their children. And so it's necessary to have your voice and your passion and your stories at the table as we build the fabric of this country and allow for the generations that will follow us to enjoy what is that golden dream, the American dream. So congratulations, Papa, congratulations, HB, and all of the local leadership team and the membership of the Albany Capital District chapter of this wonderful Papa organization. The Asian and Pacific Islander Americans are a great force. They're a powerful additive, a crown jewel in the mosaic that we call the Capital District version of Americana. Proud to be able to be your voice in Washington. And with that, if you have comments or questions, we can stay for yell a little while, I believe. Max, what time?
Yeah, we can stay for a second.
See, that's my grandfather clock in the corner of the room. And it chimes loud and clear when I need to move on. Okay, any comments or questions you might have? Yes?
Yes, Paul.
How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
This is so good to see so many familiar faces.
We all know Paul is our friend for Asian community for many, many years. Actually, our Chinese Community Center, Paul has played a very big role for us to be able to acquire that building. Paul, I have a question about DACA. In the media, TV or internet, a lot of things we hear about DACA are about immigrants or of South America descent. Actually, we have many Asian descent young children are also dreamers, and we have not. We haven't really. We haven't really heard so much about Asian dreamers. Actually, there's a big population that belong to DACA as well. Right now, I actually read about another bill, I think maybe by Republicans, the Success Bill. Would you tell us a little bit more about DACA and the Success Bill? What would be the difference? What would be the common points between the two?
Right. There, in some of the bills, the bill that I'm on is bipartisan. A colleague of mine from Florida and a colleague from California, Judy Chu. I believe, or no, I take that back. Lucille is from California. She is the co-prime. But that bill is I think the best version because it provides the greatest opportunity for dreamers. And I've signed on to that bill. In fact, we have a motion to discharge that to the floor that many have signed. I think I was number 72 on that list, but many were after me. So we're hoping that we can get a majority of legislators, because there are Republicans and Democrats who support the Dreamers Act, and I'm hoping that that version will be the one that will go forward. It again offers the fullest support. To your point about the demographics of the dreamer, and it's a worldwide thing. You know, there are 800,000 dreamers, and they cover the scope of the world really well. And it's why Judy Chu, as the chair of the Asian Pacific Islander Caucus, was one of the speakers. There were very few, but she was one of the few at the most recent press conference to speak for the caucus in that regard. because it's recognized that in that population of 800,000, there are many who are of Asian background or Pacific Islander background. Anyone else? This is good. How big is the membership now? With
Now 85.
Wonderful. Yeah, this is great.
It started and we are picking up like numbers and we are growing up, so maybe in a few years everybody will join.
We have more than half of like members, so that's good.
Excellent. And Rob, were you going to say something on behalf of Tricia or no?
No, that's fine. You covered most of the stuff, so you are always in all the events. You are explaining what is going on in Congress, how we can help. Definitely from Tricia or up, we want to work with you and do whatever we can. Thank
Well, yeah, I have to tell you, you lead the way, because this morning Max and I were going to a walk in the Colony Park, the one way up on Route 9. And so we were wondering if we're going in the right direction. I said, no, I know where this pavilion is because the Chinese Community Center has had us over for their summer picnic. So you're leading the way. You're the trailblazers. So I knew exactly where we were going. So by the way, it has been an honor to work with the Chinese Community Cultural Center, because way back when I was in the State Assembly, I believe the grant was for 50,000, was it?
50,000.
To do the startup, because again, I think our heritage is a gift. It certainly defines us, and it nurtures us, and it sustains us. You know, those roots are very important, and the beauty, I believe, in this country is that we don't turn into some steaming cauldron, but that we maintain that identity and share it as a heritage. And heritage is our gift. We're each blessed with that gift of heritage. And like any gift, it has its greatest value when it's exchanged. So the Chinese Cultural Community Center is that opportunity for everyone to share their gift of heritage. Think of it, many, many families have incorporated children into their family that are of Asian background. And those children deserve to have their culture maintained and to perhaps learn the language and all of the traditions that accompany the Heritage Walk. And so it was such an honor to work with the center, and what I have to do if I ever find time is learn the language. and Phil, I asked them once to teach me how to say Happy Mother's Day, because it was around Mother's Day the one time I was at the center, and everyone chuckled because I think instead of saying mother, I was saying cow. Or horse, what was it? What sounds like mother? Horse, okay. So instead of saying mother, I was saying horse, so I said, well, maybe I'll cool the greeting for a little while.
I just have one point to add. Since I get involved in the Chinese Community Center has an annual picnic, and we have held annual picnic many, many years, even before 2004, but I first started to be involved with the Chinese Community Center in 2004. And as far as I remember, Paul has been in our every picnic. Every picnic.
Again, it's a great district to represent because there's such a cultural diversity that, I think we each come from a limited environment, and to be able to stretch and learn and understand and be more sensitive and respectful of all the cultures that are incorporated in the family of the 20th Congressional District, you need to do that outreach. And I totally respect and appreciate the fact that your invitation is always there. It's not like I have to, go in unsolicited. It's that solicitation that's wonderful. And it's very meaningful, and I cherish it.
Congressman, I have a quick question. I haven't lived in the Capital District in a couple of years, admittedly. But what I did want to ask you was, there's a rising threat of hate crimes and violence, and there was a recent trial in the Capital District where those gentlemen wanted to commit a terrorist attack on the mosque. Has your office worked with the community as far as potential grants? I know there's Homeland Security. I think FEMA operates some of these grants. As far as being able to educate communities as to what federal resources might be available to help strengthen their security infrastructure or apparatus.
Yeah, we have worked with a number of groups. We've also been involved in supporting legislation that advances the whole concept of addressing hate crimes in a meaningful way. Again, the tone has been established. There's license, I believe, in our society now to speak. I'll just use this word crudely. I won't go any farther than that. But, you know, we should set a tone in this country of diversity that welcomes. You know, people will say, well, we have to learn to live with diversity or tolerate it. No, we celebrate it. So, and we need to keep moving in that direction. You know, our founding parents framed it well. We the people in search of a more perfect union. So when we can celebrate diversity, that's reaching that moment of perfection. But if we keep moving in that direction, that's progress. Okay? We're proud,